Welcome to the Livermore Indivisible meeting and happy St. Patrick's Day. I just need to turn off my got it here. Today we have two distinct subjects, child marriage in California and the wonderful Andrea Miller from the Reclaim Our Vote. Livermore Indivisible has been writing postcards through Reclaim Our Vote, and Andrea will give us an update. Throughout all the talks, if you want to, please put your questions in the chat. And I'm going to share my screen right now just to start off and talk about child marriage in California. Hopefully you should see the slideshow from the beginning. I think I need to unstop screen sharing and try it one more time. I apologize for the multiple tries. It's not, for some reason, it's not cooperating. Anyway, can you see that, at least some of the screen?
Mm-hmm.
We can.
Okay. Okay, I apologize. It's not actually showing it in a slide view, which I don't quite understand from the beginning. We'll see if we can work on this. Anyway, I wanted to talk first about child marriage in California. Until State Senator Wahab spoke to us in October, we had no idea that child marriage in California was allowed by law. During her talk, she spoke of her legislative accomplishments and disappointments. One of her disappointments was her bill to eliminate child marriage. It ended up being so watered down that it died in committee. The opposition to the bill was Planned Parenthood and the ACLU, which I found personally very perplexing. After searching online, articles popped up from Cal Matters and the LA Times that I've listed on these slides. And the articles did confirm that California does allow child marriage, and that the opposition to placing a minimum age to marry in California is the ACLU and Planned Parenthood. We reached out to both organizations, and the ACLU response is on our website. Planned Parenthood did not respond after weeks of effort. Senator Wahab's Director of Communications sent us material related to child marriage, including a report by Child USA, who sponsored the Senator's 2023 bill. The report, which was written in 2022, rated various states for their child marriage laws. California ranked 1 on a scale from 1 to 5, and unfortunately, 1 was not the best, it was the worst. California has this ranking with such notable states as Mississippi, West Virginia, and Oklahoma. Texas is ranked 4, and Florida is ranked 3. If you'd like more information, all of the articles that are on this view graph, as well as Senator Wahab's sponsors, Child USA's report, links can be found on our website. And I'll go to next. The Cal Matter and LA Times article also mentioned a 2024 legislative effort to end child marriage. And that's through a collaboration of Unchained at Last and Assembly Member Petrie-Norris from Orange County. After contacting Unchained at Last and Assembly Member Petrie-Norris's office, we are fortunate today to have 2 speakers to explain the problem of child marriage in California and how they suggest resolving it legislatively. Our first speaker, Becca Powell, is the Director of Advocacy and Outreach of Unchained at Last. Unchained at Last is a survivor-led nonprofit dedicated to ending forced and child marriage in the United States. As Becca is currently on a plane to California, she recorded her talk on February 8th. In the beginning of her talk, she congratulates Livermore Indivisible on joining the California Coalition to End Child Marriage, which the Livermore Indivisible Steering Committee voted to join after several discussions about the issue of child marriage. If you do have a question during the videotape of Becca's talk, please put your questions in the chat. Now I'm going to try to play this. We hope that this will work.
Hi, Livermore Indivisible. My name is Becca Powell, and I am the Director of Advocacy and Outreach for Unchained at Last. And I am so grateful that you are now members of our California Coalition to End Child Marriage. Welcome. Again, I am from Unchained at Last, which is a survivor-led nonprofit dedicated to ending forced and child marriage in the United States through both direct services and systems change. Unchained was founded by Petrie-Norris, who herself is a survivor of forced marriage. And out of her traumatic experience, she started Unchained to help those who are fleeing from forced or impending forced marriages. And I'm happy to let you know that since Unchained's founding, we've helped almost 1,000 individuals escape from a forced or impending forced marriage. So really, really grateful for all the success that we've had on the direct services side. But the reason why we branched out into our mission of ending child marriage is because more and more girls were reaching out. And unfortunately, just the way that the law is written in most states, it's nearly impossible for us to help a minor who's in the situation where they're facing a forced marriage. So because of that, we started our crusade to end child marriage across all 50 states. And I'm happy to let you know that we have had success so far in 10 US states since we started this mission in 2015. Those states are Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Rhode Island, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, and Michigan. And we're really hopeful that Washington State will be number 11. That bill should be passing in just a couple of weeks. Actually, by the time you're seeing this, March 17th is already the end of the Washington session. So very hopeful that we will already have celebrated the 11th state by that time. And very hopeful that California can be among the first dozen states to end child marriage in the United States. So I'm happy to talk about the issue of child marriage in the United States, or in California specifically, the dangers in the current law and why child marriage is itself inherently dangerous. So as many of you are probably aware, the marriage age in California is 18. But there exists in the law some really dangerous loopholes. A parent can enter a minor of any age into a marriage with judicial approval, and also a judge can enter a minor of any age into a marriage if there's no parent or guardian willing or able to consent to that marriage. And unfortunately, those two loopholes are really dangerous. As direct service providers, we can
Yeah. I apologize for the perhaps this will help.
Hi,
and I'll push it forward.
Specifically, the dangers in the current law and why child marriage is itself inherently dangerous. So, as many of you are probably aware, the marriage age in California is 18. But there exists in the law some really dangerous loopholes. A parent can enter a minor of any age into a marriage with judicial approval, and also a judge can enter a minor of any age into a marriage if there's no parent or guardian willing or able to consent to that marriage. And unfortunately, those two loopholes are really dangerous. As direct service providers, we can tell you that when a person is being forced to marry, their own parents almost always play a really crucial role in facilitating that marriage. So in a forced marriage, we would absolutely expect the parents to consent. And so unfortunately, what happens is that parental consent can usually be parental coercion in the case of a forced marriage. And the judicial review process that's in place is a really well-meaning safeguard intended to mitigate the risk of forced marriage and to make it so that no one can be coerced. In fact, part of the judicial review process is that the judge needs to interview the minor and find that there is no evidence of coercion or undue influence on the minor. But imagine what must be going through the head of a minor who's being forced to marry by their own parents. Their parents are likely coaching them every step of the way, including when they're going to be going to talk to the judge. Of course, the parent knows the process. They have, this entire plan laid out for their child to be forced into a marriage. Of course, they're going to tell their child, we're going to the court today. You're going to tell the judge that you love this person and that you want to get married and that nobody is influencing your decision. And if you don't, well, then you know what's going to happen when you come home. So unfortunately, what happens with the judicial review process is it's putting the onus on a terrified teen to try to figure out some safe way to communicate to the judge that they're being forced, when in actuality what's going to happen if they are honest with the judge is that they're going to be sent back home to the family that was forcing them to marry in the first place. In fact, because of this, we can tell you that in practice, we have spoken to hundreds of child marriage survivors who were married in states across the US where they had to speak to a judge and get judicial approval for their marriage. And not a single one has ever felt that they could have been honest with the judge about what was happening to them in that situation. It is simply an impossible situation for them. So that judicial review process, while well-intentioned, unfortunately doesn't mitigate the risk of forced marriage for those reasons. There's a few other really dangerous aspects of the current law, and one is that it completely undermines California's statutory rape laws. Usually, sex with a minor under the age of 18 is rape unless the perpetrator first marries that minor. So essentially what we're creating is a get out of jail free card for somebody who wants to commit statutory rape. If that person rapes a child once, California says that's a crime. But if somebody signs up to rape that child over and over again as their spouse, then they get a marriage certificate and a huge party, and we call it a wedding. So unfortunately, that is just a complete undermining of California's own statutory rape laws. And then the last really important dangerous aspect of the current law is that minors in California are automatically emancipated when they're married, which is really dangerous public policy. It likely ends their parents' financial obligation. And usually in California, you can't become emancipated unless you're at least 14 and you prove your own financial independence and lawful income. But no one is looking at that when we're automatically emancipating minors just because they're being married. And so what tends to happen is when they lose that financial dependence on their parents, they become financially dependent on their spouse, which is a known risk factor for domestic violence. And it's one of the main reasons why domestic violence survivors cited for staying in an abusive relationship. So unfortunately, that is a really, really dangerous situation that we see over and over again. And additionally, the automatic emancipation can lead to teen homelessness. 70 to 80% of marriages before 18 end in divorce. 70 to 80%. So if that minor is financially dependent on their spouse and that marriage has an 80% chance of ending, where is that minor supposed to go after that divorce? We have unfortunately seen some of them end up on the street. And then lastly, we've seen this automatic emancipation become a really powerful incentive for forced marriage. Some of you might have been wondering, why on earth would a parent marry off their own child? Well, here's a reason that we've unfortunately seen a few times: to get out of a child support obligation or a child custody battle. We actually worked on a case in Idaho where a father paid a man money to marry his 16-year-old daughter so that she would be emancipated and he would no longer be in his child custody battle, which was keeping him from moving out of state. And the daughter was married off, and the mother of this girl found out too late, and she tried to fight in the courts to get that marriage annulled. And she fought that case all the way up to the Idaho Supreme Court. And unfortunately, the Idaho Supreme Court said, we're sorry, she's married, she's emancipated, and there's nothing we can do. And so unfortunately, that woman never got her daughter back. And we've seen this same situation happen a handful of times. So just another reason why that automatic emancipation is really dangerous. And then lastly, I wanted to just circle back to the fact that there is no minimum marriage age in California. The effective marriage age is 0 because there's no minimum age specified in the law, which puts California in a really rare category in both the United States and around the world. Currently, I'm speaking to you in February. There are 5 states that have no minimum marriage age. I'm hopeful that by March, when you're seeing this, Washington will have set their marriage age at 18 with no exceptions. So California would remain one of 4. States around the country are setting a minimum marriage age. We absolutely want the minimum marriage age to be 18 with no exceptions. But it is very, very rare that there is no minimum marriage age in the law. And it actually puts California's laws in line with the laws in both Iran and Yemen. Those are 2 other countries that we have seen around the world that have no minimum marriage age specified in the law. So those are all the reasons why the law itself is inherently dangerous. And you might be thinking, well, okay, I can see some cracks in this system. Obviously, we're allowing some forced marriages to get by for the reasons that I listed. But there must be some way to improve the system. There's got to be some safeguard that can be put in place to make it so that no forced marriages occur, but that, consensual marriages can occur. But unfortunately, the solution is not to create a better system because really, unfortunately, there is no perfect system. There is no way to completely eliminate the risk of forced marriage. And so the only solution is to set the marriage age at 18 with no exceptions, because that way, if somebody is being forced to marry, they can at least reach out for help from a group like Unchained at Last, or some of our allies who also help those who are fleeing from forced marriages. And it has nothing to do with a maturity. That's the number one thing that I like to let people know. Minors can consent to all sorts of things. They can consent to medical procedures. In many states at certain ages, minors can consent to sexual activity. But this has nothing to do with that ability to make good decisions or any kind of maturity. I think we all know that you don't wake up on your 18th birthday with some newfound wisdom or ability to make good decisions. But what you do wake up with is all of the rights of adulthood that you didn't have even the day before. And that's so crucial, especially for somebody who's being forced to marry. So before somebody turns 18 in California, it's almost impossible for them to even open the door and leave home if their parents are planning an unwanted wedding for them, even if they're very mature. Running away from home is a status offense in California, and that minor can be taken into temporary custody by law enforcement. It's also really difficult for them to get help from an advocate like Unchained at Last or one of our allies. We could face criminal charges for helping a minor in that situation. And unfortunately, Child Protective Services is not a solution. Caseworkers typically point out that preventing a legal marriage is not in their mandate. So it's very difficult just for them to open the door and leave home. But even if they manage to do that, there's really nowhere for them to go. Domestic violence shelters across the U.S., we have found, will routinely turn away unaccompanied minors. And youth shelters only allow a 14-day stay, and their main goal is to reunite that minor with their parent, which is obviously not a solution for a minor who is facing a forced marriage. And an adult in this terrifying situation might want to retain an attorney to help them figure out their complex legal needs, but minors can't easily retain an attorney because most contracts with minors are voidable. And they're also not allowed to independently bring a legal action, which just creates additional obstacles for them. And even though they're automatically emancipated upon marriage and they do receive some limited rights of adulthood, these rights unfortunately arrive too late for a minor who's being forced to marry. They would first have to undergo the trauma of a forced marriage, which in our experience can typically mean being pulled out of school and raped on their wedding night and a complete loss of sexual and reproductive rights. And that trauma can't be undone just by stamping emancipated across a girl's forehead. But additionally, emancipation brings only limited rights of adulthood. In our experience, domestic violence shelters will turn away even emancipated minors. And in fact, because of all this, the UN Office for the High Commissioner on Human Rights considers all child marriage to be forced marriage, simply because minors don't have the legal rights that they need to navigate a contract as serious as marriage. And as you're all likely aware, forced marriage is a crime in California. But similar to how this is a workaround for the statutory rape law, child marriage is also a workaround for that forced marriage ban. And when girls have reached out to Unchained and have learned of their limited legal options, I'm really sorry to tell you that we've seen some turn to self-harm and even suicide attempts rather than face this legal trap of being forced into a marriage. So that's the main reason why child marriage is inherently dangerous. It's just simply that minors don't have the legal rights that they need the day before until the day that they turn 18. But additionally, child marriage produces really devastating lifelong repercussions and destroys nearly every aspect of an American girl's life, from her health, her education, her economic opportunities, her physical safety. She's more likely to experience intimate partner violence, both physical and sexual, and more likely to lose all reproductive and sexual rights and be forced to endure pregnancy and childbirth and parenthood without her consent. And again, 70 to 80% of these marriages end in divorce, which just brings additional instability and hardship to her life. For all these reasons, our own US State Department calls marriage before 18 a human rights abuse. And additionally, I think it's just worth noting that it undermines our California statutory rape laws, and that's just another inherent danger in the institution of child marriage. Now, I wish I could tell you all that this wasn't happening with alarming frequency in California, but I have some really devastating statistics to share with you. More than 8,000 minors in California are entered into marriage every year, and that's per US Census data. 8,000 every year, and that number is actually increasing every year. And across the US, almost all of the minors who marry are girls wed to adult men. And again, 100% of the marriages in California involving a minor legalize what would be considered a rape outside of marriage. But there is a simple solution, which I'm really happy to tell you about. The legislation, which has been introduced by Assemblymember Petrie-Norris. I don't have the bill number because I'm recording this before the bill number comes out, but I'm sure you will have it by now, or I have sent it along with several communications to your organization. But that bill would set the marriage age at 18 with no exceptions. It's really, really, really simple, clean legislation that harms no one. It costs nothing, but it ends a human rights abuse. All it does is keep the marriage at 18, but eliminate those harmful loopholes. And as I mentioned, 10 states around the country have already done this, hopefully 11 by the time you're seeing this. And countries around the world are doing this as well. This is actually a global movement. Under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, under Sustainable Development Goal 5.3, which is about achieving gender equality, calls for the end to harmful practices such as female genital mutilation, as well as child marriage. So we definitely want to keep our promise to the UN. We want to keep our promise to the world. 193 countries, including the US, agreed to that. And we certainly don't want California to get left behind. 10, hopefully 11 states have already ended child marriage. Most of them are extremely progressive states, and California is one of the few progressive states that still has not ended child marriage. And we certainly hope to see that change in 2024. Unchained at Last and our allies in the California Coalition, and especially our lobbyists in Sacramento, have been meeting with legislators in California for several months to tell them about this issue and to get their support for ending child marriage. With the bill language now finalized, we have, I want to say it is 20 co-authors. I think it's probably a little less than 20. It's almost 20 co-authors in both the Assembly and the Senate. And we are really, really excited to see where this bill goes. So, once again, thank you all so much for joining the coalition. I am really delighted to be doing this work with you, and hopefully looking forward to coming to Sacramento and celebrating California ending child marriage sometime this year. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Well, in the video that you saw from Becca, she did mention Washington State, and we have good news. The Washington became the 11th state in the country to end child marriage when Governor Inslee signed the bill on March 8th. So that's a bit of good news at this point. Now I'd like to go to our next speaker, which is Victoria Harris. And she is the Senior Legislative Assistant to Assemblymember Petrie-Norris. Assemblymember Petrie-Norris represents the 73rd Assembly District, which covers Southern Orange County, and has introduced Bill AB 2924, prohibiting child marriage. I want to thank Victoria for taking time out of her busy schedule to tell us about the bill and how we can support the bill. Please welcome Victoria.
Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me to join you this afternoon and for your consideration of supporting this wonderful bill. It's really hard to follow Becca because she pretty much laid out the problem for us here. For many years, California legislators have been trying to attack this problem. There has been some movement back in, I believe it looks like 2018, Senator Hill introduced legislation that put some guardrails around child marriage. However, guardrails or not, this is a practice that should not be happening in California. As Becca mentioned, this is considered a human rights abuse in other parts of the world. It should not be happening here in California at all. So to that end, we have 21 legislative co-authors that are standing with us on this bill. The bill is expected to be heard probably mid to late April. It hasn't been set for a committee, but as many folks as we can get on board to support this, the better. Because as I mentioned on the onset, this is going to be an uphill battle. As you all probably know, Senator Wahab has another bill in the Senate, but it does not go as far as Assemblymember Petrie-Norris's bill does. Her bill prohibits child marriage before 18, full stop. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have related to the bill. Otherwise, again, would really, really welcome your support.
Do you have any indication of who essentially is going to be lobbying against the bill? Maybe you could spend a few minutes talking about that.
Yes. The usual suspects, the ACLU and Planned Parenthood have deep concerns about the bill. Basically, their concerns lie around the fact that in some cases, it might be in a young person's best interest to be married. An example that we were given was a girl who may be pregnant, a 17-year-old who may be pregnant by a 19-year-old, and he has a job, he has benefits, and it would be in their best interest. To that argument, in California, she would have resources available to help her with that pregnancy. Marriage should not be looked at by California as a solution to teen pregnancy. That argument just kind of blew me away when I heard it. Another argument that they seem to think is working is that we have guardrails where we get a report as to how many children are actually being married in California. Again, it doesn't matter. One child being married in California is one too many. So, but unfortunately, we have folks here in the legislature who are entertaining these arguments, and that's where our fight comes in. And that's where we need for you folks to reach out to your representatives and explain to them that this practice is unacceptable and that we should not have these loopholes in our laws that allow it. I mean, really, if I were forced into a marriage, there would be consequences. If you were forced into a marriage, there would be consequences. But a child being forced into a marriage and there are no consequences, that's unacceptable.
And even if the ACLU addresses issues of the fact that, or they talk about that if you're married, you're emancipated. However, it's still very difficult or near impossible to get a divorce.
Exactly, exactly. Especially if you don't have any resources, you're stuck. And, you know, that's usually at a point where your education stagnates. You have no autonomy. You are at the will of someone else, whether this person loves you or not. It stifles your ability to grow as a person. And this is not something that we should be codifying or have in our laws.
Does anyone have any question?
Yes, I see a question here. Given
Okay.
the opposition to passing this legislation, would having a minimum age of 16 instead of no minimum age, as we currently have, be an acceptable alternative? We don't want to go there. We would like 18. I mean,
Are you there?
yes, I'm here. At this age, I mean, at this point, we have studies that have shown us that most of these marriages are either forced or in some way coerced by a parent or some outside or some third party. So even at 16, that element would still be there. And that's the problem, the force, the taking away a person's autonomy. I mean, we let children decide all the time, as Becca said, you know, about health issues, about you know, making decisions about, you know, their sexuality. But when it comes to this is not a decision. More often than not, it's something that is put upon the child.
There's another question in here. It's asking, what is the difference between Wahhab's bill and AB 2924? I believe the senator, it's just a restriction on or tightening of any kind of loophole as far as registering child marriages.
Right.
That's the case. It doesn't change the current status. It's just how it, the Senate bill would just tighten the fact that they actually do have to register a child marriage.
And it would have more of an impact on the reporting than it would of the actual act of the actual practice of child marriage in California.
One of the issues I think that I had talked with Becca about is whether I was surprised, personally, I was surprised that Planned Parenthood was opposing this. And I had asked Becca, and I'll ask you the same question: is this happening nationally, or is this just statewide within California? Does the National Organization of Planned Parenthood are they neutral, or what's your thoughts on that?
What we found is that in some cases, in the process of getting these bans in other states, we have found that Planned Parenthood has been in support. And right now we're trying to find out, you know, what was that nuance, what made this supportable here and not in California. So we're trying to figure that out now. But no, California, I think in New York, I think Planned Parenthood supported. Don't quote me on that, but I think that they did. Again, I really need to get that firm.
Okay. I put out on the chat, I actually put links. Unchained at Last has a action network that I put a link to that makes it very easy to contact your representatives about this bill if you're interested, and if you're supporting ending child marriage through AB 2924. There certainly you can contact your Assembly member, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, and Steve Glazier, our senator, but feel free to also use Unchained Action Network.
Thank you. And I'd also like to share in the link, a link to the committee portal where you can submit letters of support. The bill is currently in the Judiciary Committee. And here is the link.
Okay, and Kyoko has a question that is asking which committee is it going through?
It is going through the Judiciary Committee,
The
which is,
judicial.
and again, we anticipate it being heard sometime mid-April.
I think in my correspondence with you, Victoria, I had also mentioned that this is, Livermore Indivisible nominated AB 2924 to be one of the California State Strong Bills of Indivisibles of California. And it's certainly going through a nominating process right now to see whether it's going to be one that's going to be advocated, but it certainly, it is a bill that's endorsed by the State Strong program.
Thank
So
you.
hopefully that might help. And we can write letters through that program as well.
Thank you so much, because the more support, the stronger the show of support we have on this bill, the better.
Does anyone else have any questions at all for Victoria?
Here, let me drop my phone number.
Maybe you could say a few words about why Assembly Member Petrie-Norris is supporting this. And, you know, I want to thank her for her advocacy in this area to pushing this issue forward and making it visible.
Because, hold on just a moment. She took on this issue several years ago, because when she first heard about it, it was like shocking. I mean, this is happening in California. And I too, when I heard of this, I had no idea that this was something that was actually legal in California. Especially when, you know, we have, you know, vilified so many other countries, you know, for this practice. And, you know, it's shocking and it's happening. And once you hear some of the stories of women who have fallen victim to this practice, it'll make your skin crawl. So yes, the member was just absolutely horrified when she heard about this practice happening in California, and is committed to doing something about it. And we've got a really strong coalition. I think, as I mentioned, 21 co-authors on this, that are going to stand with us and try to get this to the governor's desk and convince him that this is something that needs to stop. And as Becca said, it's a very straightforward, simple bill. And if you'll allow me, the language says, the bill would repeal the authorization for any person under 18 years of age to be issued a marriage license or to establish domestic partnership, thereby prohibiting the person under 18 years of age from being issued a marriage license or from establishing a domestic partnership. It's very simple.
Yep. Any other questions for Victoria?
And pardon my fire on this. I mean, I just, it just makes me so angry when I think of a young woman being forced into a situation like this, when, when there are so many opportunities for an American woman in our country.
I feel your surprise or your fire. I also feel your shock that this could be happening in California. I guess that's why I was so surprised. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is one of the states that has put child marriage at 18. And I'm proud of my home state, and I would love to be proud of the state that I've adopted to doing the same.
Well, it's a simple fix and it needs to be done now. So please stand with us. If you can get, you know, all of your members to to write in letters. Individual letters help, group letters are helpful. If you can call in at the time when it's time to testify on behalf of the bill, that would be amazing as well. But we need a strong showing.
Can you perhaps it would be reasonable if we could keep a conversation going on, and maybe you could alert me when these activities need to happen so that we could participate if people are interested.
Absolutely.
That would be wonderful.
And here, let me give you my email address as well. Oh, but you have it, Karen, so.
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
And I can, would you mind if I would put that in the chat later on?
Yes, of course.
That would be great. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
so if you have any questions or if you need any information on how the bill stands or if amendments are coming, please reach out.
Here's a question from asking whether there is any cultural or religious group that is opposing this.
Great question. We actually received a letter of support from a, oh, hold on just a moment. Oh, I don't have, where is my bag? Well, it's an interfaith coalition of a bunch of different religions in support of this bill. And I found that to be absolutely amazing and very important.
Could you send that my way? That would be wonderful. And I can share it. We can share it with our people.
Yes, absolutely.
There was a question whether there was some distinguishing between Senator Wahab's bill and Assembly Petrie-Norris's bill. And the senator's bill does not change the law in California. It just changes the reporting issues.
Right. In a nutshell, our bill would end child marriage. Her bill will not.
No. All right. Well, thank you very much, Victoria. I appreciate you coming and spending your lovely March 17th, St. Patrick's Day with us. So, but this is such an important, I think this is such an important issue. And thank you to Assembly Member Petrie-Norris for supporting this and advocating for this.
Well, thank you all for inviting me, and thank you for your support of this bill. I can't express enough how important this is. My very first job, just a quick story, my very first job when I got out of high school, I worked in a women's shelter. And I worked there for 3 or 4 years. Helped me pay my way through college. One of the things that struck me in that job was the number of very, very, very young mothers that came through those doors. One woman in particular was a young woman who was married when she was from, I think, either Mississippi or Alabama. She was married when she was 16. Her husband moved her to California. By the time she was 21, she had 4 kids. And he was abusing her monthly. It seemed like every other month she was in and out of that shelter. Fast forward to now, and I see this bill before me, and I can't help but think about her and how different her life would have been if somebody would have stepped in and said, there's another way. So with this bill, we hope that young women will have time to pause and think about their situation and realize that whatever challenge they're facing, there's another way. So thank you all for having me, and thank you for your support.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you.
You all have a wonderful St. Patrick's afternoon.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Well, after that, our next speaker, Andrea Miller, does not really need an introduction, but what the heck, I'll give her an introduction anyway. So Andrea Miller is the founding board member of the Center for Common Ground and Reclaim Our Vote. And she's the executive director of People Demanding Action, founding president of the National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia, and a member of the Democracy and Governance Working Group of the Virginia Green New Deal. Livermore has been writing postcards with Reclaim Our Vote for several years. Yes, Andrea will tell us about the effectiveness of the postcards we helped to write, including sharing some of the data collected by Reclaim Our Vote and Reclaim Our Vote strategy for 2024 election. But first, I'm going to ask her to say a few words about child marriage and what her thoughts are and what's happening maybe in Virginia.
Well, thank you so very much, Erin. Thank you, Livermore Indivisible. I am thrilled to be with you on Zoom today. Child marriage. In 2016, Virginia basically outlawed child marriage. They did make one exception. If you had legally been declared an emancipated minor, which is very, very difficult to achieve, then an emancipated minor with proof that they were an emancipated minor would be able to get married under the age of 18. And again, as your previous guest said, when you look at these child marriages, they either end in abuse and divorce or just lifelong abuse. And then it ends with the child bride trying to run away. Again, this is a form of involuntary servitude. A woman at the age of 16, a girl at the age of 16, has normally not completed her education. That means that in the world of work, she will be at the bottom pay run, as women are anyway. I've been advocating for the Equal Rights Amendment since I was 11 years old. I was 70 on March 5th. So that means I've got, 58 odd years in on the Equal Rights Amendment. So this whole notion of a woman gets married as a child, and then she basically goes through most of her life kind of as that child who ages. So absolutely terrible. Yes, California, let's get rid of it. I have 55,000, no, I have 35,000 people on my mailing list from California. And when I go to my C4 side, I probably have another 45,000. Are you guys doing an advocacy alert on this?
I don't think that we have. So if you can help us,
This
that
would
would be
be a
wonderful.
great advocacy alert because, again, I think most people are not aware that this still exists in California. And again, as your previous guest said, there was a woman who came from Mississippi. All right. Knowing what Mississippi is, we're going, all right, yeah, I'd expect they'd be doing that kind of thing in Mississippi. But in 2024 in California, I don't think so. There is absolutely no excuse for this, no excuse whatsoever. And I think we need to go beat up Planned Parenthood because they have taken a dumb approach. They claim that they oppose this bill because they are saying somehow this interferes with reproductive rights. Okay, so you're saying a girl of 16 has the right to get pregnant and potentially not be able to do anything about it because her husband wants her to have a baby. What? I don't know what kind of convoluted thinking that is. That's ridiculous.
Well, thank you for starting out with that. I really appreciate that, Andrea. And I will be in contact with you through Kyoko about perhaps using you to do an advocacy alert. I think one of the things that before you joined, I pointed out that there was a report done by Child USA, and it rated California as #1 as far as the laws, meaning it's the worst for the laws on child marriage, along with Mississippi, West Virginia, and Oklahoma.
Yes. And normally those are states where you're going, I'm not really having any of those states on my top 10 places where I want to move other than California. So California really is going to have to change that. And I think if the legislators start feeling the heat from a lot of people who can vote for them, that will make them begin to backtrack.
Well, thank you. And now I'll turn it over to you to talk about Reclaim Our Vote and postcarding. And thank you for thank you for adding your support to this.
Oh, you are very, very welcome, Karen. And I would love to figure out how to do this. And again, I'm picturing how we're starting the letter. In every other country in the world, child marriage is human rights abuse. Boom. So it's like, okay. And just because it's California, suddenly it's okay. All right, now let's talk about something where I live this every day. 2024 and turning out the Black vote. This is something that the name of the organization is Center for Common Ground. The name of the campaign is Reclaim Our Vote. And we started the campaign all the way back in 2017. And then we created the 501c3 organization so we would be faith organization friendly in 2018. So I brought a presentation which I will give you a link in the chat because it's kind of a living presentation. It's growing so that if people want to talk to their postcard teams about why we're postcarding in this place as opposed to that place, you'll be able to go to this and go, ha, the reason we're doing Texas is X. So one of the things that is not in the presentation is all the states where we do not work. Center for Common Ground works in states where the BIPOC population, Black, Indigenous people of color, of registered voters, not just population, they've got to be registered voters, is 20%. So we do not work in places like Ohio, 11%, Pennsylvania, 12%, Wisconsin, 5%, and Michigan, 14%, because the BIPOC population just isn't big enough. So when you see in our presentation where I'm only talking about Black voters, and in Georgia, Black voters are 33% of the registered voters, we work in states where if we can turn out that sleeping monolith of Black voters, we potentially can win that election. So let me go and grab my presentation. All right, there it is. And here we go. Let's get it in present mode. And I'm going to walk you through some things. All right, Center for Common Ground, we've got a number of campaigns. Reclaim Our Vote is our big national postcard campaign. We run an internship program called Students for Justice. Vote Equality is run by one of our board members who does the Equal Rights Amendment. She picked that up when I started doing this full time. And we've got a Democracy Center campaign. So if you look at the map, you'll see these are the states and the locations where we have democracy centers. What's a democracy center? Well, it's normally located in a Black or Hispanic community. Right now, they're all in Black communities, where 55% of the registered voters in that community just stop voting. They just don't vote at all. They're in danger of getting thrown off the voter rolls if we don't get them to vote. So we go in, we establish a democracy center with trusted messengers, people that are already in the community, and they're year round. We've got a really simple mission. We want to educate and empower underrepresented voters in voter suppression states to engage in elections and advocate for their right to vote. So we look at elections as one step, and then coming in and reminding the people that just got elected of what you need them to do as that second critical piece. And in all the places where we work, nobody was really doing that second piece. And we are delighted that where we have a number of our democracy centers, people have started doing that. Now, in 2020, we had 44,000 volunteers. We did outreach to 14 million voters of color. We sent 9.4 million postcards. So postcards are going to be the number one primary method of outreach. Why? Because we have an address for every voter. We do not have a phone number for every voter. We sent 2.9 million text messages and 1.7 million phone calls. Now, in 2024, we've got 75,000 volunteers. Our goal is to contact 18 million voters, 12.5 million by postcard, 3.5 million by text, 2.5 million by phone calls. We are winding down our data drive to buy data. Now, there is almost free data that we can get, which we don't want to use in most states. We want the best data that there is. You're in California, you folks use PDI, you stopped using NGP van years ago. We like PDI because they use a totally different data source than they use at NGP van. We also like PDI because we know all the executives. And when our partners in Georgia can go to a Georgia State Senate and get the new Georgia maps the day after they are approved by the legislature, and we can get them to PDI and they load them, we value that relationship. Now, if you are doing voter registration, we don't stress voter registration. There are a lot of organizations that is what they do. For many of our faith partners that are doing voter registration, we're telling them you're really going to need to change your language. Otherwise, you're going to miss a lot of opportunities. So we no longer ask people, are you registered to vote? Because most people are going to say, yeah, I'm registered to vote. And that's probably not true. So the new questions are, is your voter registration still active? Because in our voter suppression states, there are people going around looking at the voter rolls in individual counties and then claiming that certain people no longer live where they indicate they live, and they're demanding that they get kicked off the voter rolls. And there is no notice to that voter. So is your voter registration still active, or is your voter registration up to date? We are also working to get people to go to the next level. What we have found in our conversations with people on the ground, they know who the president is. Most of them know who the vice president is. They're member of Congress. That gets kind of squidgy. They are state officials, no clue. So we are working when we talk to voters to tell them about a free app website they can go to if they've got internet called Act Vote, where they can see all of their elected officials from the president all the way down to their county councils, oil and water board, and judges, with the idea that knowledge is power. And I'm going to skip that. All right, that's kind of a Virginia thing. All right, now, we will be working in the state of Virginia. We always work in Virginia. Virginia has an election every year because Virginia, we just love elections. Now, Virginia has 865,000 Black voters, and that is 15.13% of the registered voter population of Virginia. When you add in the Hispanic voters and the AA and HPI voters and the Native Americans, Virginia ends up at 26%. And now all these little blue dots, this is showing where the Black voting population lives. And you can see there are certain areas where there are more people than others. It didn't take my new map. That's North Carolina. I'll get you a real Virginia map. All right, there's a Virginia map. So I've got to swap that map. All right, so you can see around Richmond, around Norfolk, areas in Northern Virginia. When we get out west, it gets kind of sparse, but all those areas with a lot of blue dots, those are the Black voters. Now, in Virginia, we are only having congressional elections in 2024, presidential, U.S. Senate, and U.S. House. We have no other elections. We will be working in District 2. That's Elaine Luria's old district. That is a pickup district. We are beginning to plow the road in District 5. That is in the Charlottesville, coming down to Chesterfield. It's kind of southwestern Virginia without making it all the way to the North Carolina border. I am in District 7. District 7 is now an open congressional district because Representative Abigail Spanberger is not running for re-election to her seat. She will be running for governor in 2025. So right now there are 13 people running for that seat, both Democrats and Republicans. We are also doing some plowing of the road in District 1, where we have a good candidate, and we're going to begin doing some outreach there, with the idea being that state seats, which will be next year, and potentially in 2026, we might really be able to do something. District 10 is Jennifer Wexton's seat. She is not running for that seat because she is very, very ill, and she decided she could not run for re-election. We are doing these districts in the primary. Our congressional primary is June 18th, and early voting starts on May 4th. Yes. Virginia has 45 days of early voting. Ouch. And you don't need to see that. You don't need to see our tools. All right, now, Georgia. Georgia has a lot more Black voters than Virginia. When you look at the city of Atlanta, you can see it is almost solid blue. That is how many Black voters there are in Atlanta. So Virginia has 2.5 million Black voters, or almost 34% of the registered voters in Georgia are Black, which says the Georgia General Assembly, which is majority conservative, should not look like that. It's gerrymandering and people don't vote. So we're looking at the Congressional District 6. Lucy McBath is currently in District 7. They literally redistricted the entire state of Georgia, and they told them to create a new Black district. They didn't tell them to create an additional Black district. So that means 70 to 75% of the Black voters in Georgia are now in a completely different congressional district than they were in November. And the big problem with that is the Georgia Secretary of State has not updated the maps so that if you go to the My Voter page in Georgia and you put in your address, you are probably going to get your old congressional district and not your new one. So their congressional primary is in May. So you see the two districts we're working in that are literally right there in Atlanta. Those districts almost completely reversed. 13 used to be more rural and 6 used to be where 13 is. The difference that you make with postcards. Now, we didn't really work in Georgia in 2018. So you can see in 2020, we work with Georgia Team Unity, which at the time was the NAACP, Black Voters Matter, and a lot of other organizations. And of the 385,000 Black voters in Fulton County, this is the county with the largest Black voter population, we were able to turn out 51% in 2020. So our goal for 2024 will be 52 to 53% of the Black voters. That's what we're going for. We're going to be looking for an improvement over the last presidential election because we basically have the same partners. So we're going to be doing more on the ground. And in 2020, we didn't do the primaries. And people sometimes say, well, why do you do primary elections? 2 reasons. Reason number 1, we start getting people who are not voting in the habit of voting. And number 2, we have found that if we get someone who doesn't normally vote to go vote in the primary, we've got an 80% shot that they're going to show up in November. So we are starting early and getting people to come out and vote. Not going to walk you through all of this. I'll just tell you what it is so that when you look at it on your own, you'll know. What we did was we took the total number of Black voters who showed up for each election, and then we divided it out by age. What were the ages of these voters that showed up? And when you look at this, one of the things you will see in every single county is it is the 35 and above that are basically winning the elections. So in 2024, we are going to do more outreach directly on college campuses, working to get these younger voters. One of the problems that we are going to have in some states with the younger voters is they are not allowing them to have a polling location on campus, and a number of these campuses are out in the middle of nowhere. The other issue that we are going to see on college campuses is we are having a couple of states go, well, they're going to school here. They don't really live here. So they're going to need to vote at home, and they're going to need to vote at home with vote by mail. It's going to be an interesting year. Everybody and everything in the world on the Georgia ballot. Let's look at numbers. North Carolina has 1.5 million Black voters, or 21% of their population. This is where we shined, and it was kind of accidental. All right, as you can see, good heavens, not only do they have the U.S. House, they've got their entire statewide ticket from the governor on down. They've got Supreme Court, school board, and municipal elections. This is going to be a long ballot. Several years ago, North Carolina outlawed straight ticket voting, meaning you couldn't just say, look, just give me all the Democrats. Now people have got to go down and choose a candidate for every single office. Mecklenburg County, this is where Charlotte is the biggest, or the county in Georgia with the largest population of Black voters, followed by Wake and followed by Guilford. All right, now, we only worked in North Carolina in 2020. We didn't work in 2022. All the local groups in North Carolina had a ton of money. They thought we wanted their money. We didn't. So nobody was willing to work with us. And we weren't working in North Carolina before 2020. So in 2016, we all know how that worked out. We had 128,000 people show up to vote in Mecklenburg. 2018 kind of took a nosedive, 105,000. 2020, we postcarded every Black voter. There were only 1.2 million of them in North Carolina then. We postcarded every Black voter twice, and the turnout was 163,000 voters, or 67% of the population. That was postcards. Remember, we don't have phone numbers for all voters, so we can't call them, nor can we text them. We generated 2,400 volunteers with our partners, the NAACP at the time. Dr. Spearman, who was my partner in North Carolina, was assassinated in 2022. So we did not work with the NAACP. We did not have a partner. So in 2022, turnout plummeted from 163,000 voters to 97,000. So that means we now have local partners in Mecklenburg. We are trying to get the state able to agree to work with us, and other groups are saying, look, we don't want your money, keep your money. We just want to work with your people on the ground. We would love to get Mecklenburg County to 170,000 voters. Alabama. It wasn't Center for Common Ground then, and it was barely Reclaim Our Vote back in 2017. But in 2017, we were the only non-Alabama group working in Alabama. And in 2017, with 8 days, we made 40,000 phone calls into the Alabama Black Belt, and the rest is history. So Alabama, they have not quite 1 million Black voters, and that's 27% of their population. This year, we are targeting Congressional District 2. That is the new majority minority district that Alabama was required to create. That district goes from Montgomery down to Mobile and then heads west, kind of in the Black Belt, just a little bit south of it. We just did a texting campaign. Their primary was March 5th. We did a texting campaign targeting the two cities, Montgomery and Mobile. There were 21 candidates running for that office. Out of the 21 candidates, 8 of them, no, it was more than that, 11 of them were Democrats. The runoff is going to be April 16th. I will be talking to our partners in Alabama, Omega Sci-Fi Incorporated, to see, do they really want to work on the runoff, or do they want to save their powder for the actual general election in November? Alabama does not have early voting at all. Georgia has early voting. They have about 15 days of early voting. Virginia has 45. Alabama has none. We've been talking with our friends in Texas. Our new partners in all of our southern states. Looks like it is going to be the National Congress of Black churches. That would be the AMEs and the CMEs, and their churches are throughout the South. There are 1.3 million Black voters in Texas, and that's 7.8% of their population. There are nearly 5 million Hispanic voters in Texas, and Texas is a majority minority state. They just don't vote like it. So these are the counties that we will be targeting with postcards, texting, and phone calls. These are many of the counties that we targeted. We didn't do Smith and Kaufman in 2020, but we did many of these counties. So again, we did not work in Texas in 2022. We did our major postcarding, phone banking, and everything else. And you can see the difference that we were able to make in 2020. So our goal in 2024, we need this number to go up to, I'd like it to go up to 220, but I don't want to be greedy. I will be very happy if we get Harris County up to 215,000. There are 369,824 Black voters in Harris County. So Texas is on our radar with its 40 electoral votes. And then Dallas County is right behind Harris County with 265,000 Black voters. And as you can see, in 2020, the turnout in Dallas County was 60%. 40% in a southern state for Black voter turnout is more than respectable. In some of the Georgia counties, we were looking at less than 30%. So these numbers are respectable. We want to do better. I have new numbers for Virginia. There are my new Virginia numbers. So these are not necessarily, well, it's a statewide race, so it doesn't really matter where we get our votes as long as we get them. I already told you the congressional districts that we will be targeting: 2, 7, 10, targeting to win. 1, 5, plowing the road, getting ready for future elections. And again, look at Virginia has an election every year. So in 2020, when we were going all out in Virginia, the turnout in Virginia hit 71% for the Black voters in Henrico County. That has the largest population of Black voters in Virginia. 2021 was our gubernatorial race. So again, it dropped 9%. There are people that are 1 in 3 voters. They only vote presidential. And then 2022 is the midterms. It dropped again. So Virginia, I'm not going to make you look at these. I'm just figuring them out. These are our postcards. So those of you who postcard with us know we have absolutely beautiful postcards designed to be racially motivating, culturally sensitive, and inspiring. And we will also be running See Something, Say Something, our election problem reporting tool. And this is a national tool. I will provide you folks with the link. And if there is an interest in using this in California, you most certainly can. If you see a problem with voting or experience a problem, you would write it up on the form, either on a computer or on your phone. It is then posted to a map where everything is tabulated by category of election problem and then displayed on the map. Unlike what they have been doing at Lawyers Committee and many of the other organizations, because our data is in a database, we actually keep it and we can compare what happened in 2020 versus what happened in 2018 versus what happened in 2024, and really look at patterns. As I mentioned, we're going to be doing a lot of canvassing. Our democracy centers survey the people who live in their community. And remember, they're talking to people who've given up on voting. And they talk to them about what would make our community better. And then they collect a list of community issues. And then when we build the GOTV, it is all about information. People who don't have the internet have no way of knowing where or when early voting is unless we tell them. We also remind them, there it is. It's under this, over here on the left, why I'm voting. Taking elections out of this notion of, I'm voting for prom king and I'm voting for prom queen. I'm trying to vote based on personality. No. You as a voter have things that you want and you need. If this is what you want and this is what you need, who do you think is in the best position to give it to you? And then after the election, you're going to go into the office of whoever got elected and say, all right, these are the issues. Which one are we going to work on first? So again, this is getting people far more interested in voting than when they're just looking at personalities. I don't like the personality any of them. I don't like the way any of them look. It's not about them. It's about you. Get selfish. Think about what you want. We now have a national phone banking team. They are paid phone bankers. They are domiciled in the Virginia Beach Democracy Center. The National Phone Bank team leader, Janice Day, and I will be traveling to North Carolina, where we will be working with folks in North Carolina to set up a team in North Carolina. One of Janice's phone bankers is now in college in Georgia. He is setting up a phone bank team on his university. When we only had the team, and they're 18 to 34 years old, when we only had the team in Virginia, they were capable of making up to 4,000 calls a week. There is a minimum requirement of 400 calls a day in order for them to qualify to get paid. Here is information which I will drop in the chat along with my phone number. So I know I was talking kind of fast. So questions?
Well, there is a question. There's a question that says, have any studies been done to determine whether individual voters are more motivated by text, phone calls, or postcards?
They're more motivated by postcards because, as I said, we have addresses for every voter. We do not have phone numbers for every voter. Many voters do not answer the phone for phone numbers that they don't recognize. This is not true of rural voters. Rural voters, phone rings, they answer it. But when we are calling into urban areas, generally they do not answer the phone. That is why we leave messages. They will listen to a message. But again, if it's not their number and we've got a wrong number, we're not reaching them. The error rate on our addresses, and one of our board members has the UPS postcard address verification system is 2%. The error rate on NGP van addresses is 26%.
There's another question. Since the last presidential election, a number of states have passed laws that suppress the vote or at least change the rules, making it difficult for voters to stay current. Can you be more specific about how these laws have made your work more difficult and what you are doing to overcome them?
Well, in all of our scripts, when we talk to voters, we give voters ways to overcome whatever is being thrown at them. We make sure they understand what the current rules are in their state. For instance, North Carolina has no drop boxes. We do not encourage voters in North Carolina to vote by mail. We have that option, and if they tell us they want to vote by mail, one of our responses is then when you get your ballot, you are going to need to fill it out and mail it back right away because there are no drop boxes. So I follow the laws of every state where we are going to work. What are the good laws? What can we take advantage of? What are the bad laws? What are we going to have to be careful of? And we make sure that we update our messages so that we can let voters know what's going on. We did not work in Richmond in the presidential primary, but the head of the Richmond Board of Elections came out and announced, if you are voting by mail, please do not mail your ballot. We will not get it. Come put your ballot in our drop box. So if we had been working in Richmond, then we would have done more text messages to voters. We might have even bought a billboard and put it up on a billboard so that coming into Richmond and in and around Richmond, voters would be able to see that billboard. We have not ruled out utilizing billboards in 2024. We spent $220,000 on billboards in 2020, and that also was helpful in rural North Carolina. Voters let us know that not only was helpful, but it inspired them that someone was thinking about them and spent the money for a billboard.
One of the things that you mentioned that I have a question about, how you had mentioned that you collect local issues and try to bundle that into a reason for voting, which I think
Yes.
is an excellent idea. How do you combat the thought that, well, I voted at the last election, it never changed? And, you know, people think that if they vote once, they need to see instantaneous changes. I would personally love to have that happen. But how do you combat that? Oh, I did it once and nothing changed, so why should I do it again?
Well, we have three ways that we combat that. Well, and the big thing that we hear from young voters is my vote doesn't matter. In Virginia, we love that. Your vote doesn't matter. In 2017, we lost control of the Virginia House of Delegates by one vote. Would you have been that vote? And in Virginia, the Virginia General Assembly is now majority female. That is the first time in history. The average age is 26 years younger than it used to be. 25% of the Virginia House is Black. And in 2023, we spent seven new Black senators to the Virginia Senate, all under the age of 50. So when it's not Virginia, we talk to people about, if this is what you wanted, who did you tell that's what you wanted? You're like, what? What? Because again, remember, we help people advocate for what they want. Did you go to the school board meeting? No. Did you go to a town hall? Did you go and pay a visit to your state delegate or whatever it is? No. All right. Well, what we're going to add this year is, these are the reasons you're voting. And now, whoever gets elected, you are going to show up in their office and say, great, I'm so glad you got elected. This is what we need in our community to make it better. Which one of these things are we working on first? And I'm also helping people understand, in many of these states, the same people have been in office for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. Think of them as a butt in a seat. Is the butt doing what you want and you need? If the answer is yes, okay, let's keep the butt there. If not, you need a new butt. That's what primary elections are for. Most of our voters do not vote in primary elections. They didn't understand what they were. So when we are working on a primary, we tell people, this is your chance to decide who's going to be on the ballot in November. And people are like, that's what a primary is. Yes, 75% of Black voters never vote in primaries. We are working really hard to change that. Remember, we don't teach civics. So the fact that younger people have no clue as to how government is supposed to work is very deliberate. Also, many of our democracy centers are now hosting candidate town halls where they invite all the candidates to come in and talk to members of the community, and members of the community are going, we can do that. Yes, we don't have to be an organization. No, you don't have to be an organization. You can have a group of you get together, get the community center, and invite the candidates. Hi, we're the residents of, and again, don't say you're the resident, we're the voters from da 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 da. And we would really like a chance to speak with and hear the people running for these local offices. And they're like, and that's all we have to say. Yes. All we have to say.
Are there any other questions for Andrea? We too in California, as Kyoko points out, we too in California have a problem with lack of voters in the primary.
Yes. And that's how you end up with the same people over and over and over and over and over again ad nauseum. Yes. Yes. So you want new people, younger people that put somebody up in the primary and then work on getting a lot of people out. Our Roanoke Democracy Center, the vice mayor of the city of Roanoke was a Black woman. The senator from that area was retiring, and he had handpicked his legislative director, who was a young white guy, nice young man, very nice. And the ladies in the Democracy Center really liked Trish. And so they went out, knocked on doors, really started talking to people. Trish came into the primary late, no money, no support, and she won that primary. All right. But then the Democratic Party was mad at her because she had beat their golden boy, and so they wouldn't help her at all. So there's that. So she did not win the general. But imagine how empowered those folks in the community felt when they won that election. And this was in a community where 55% of the Black voters didn't even bother to vote in the general. 80% of them had never voted in the primary. And they came out and they won.
This is a distant aside, but you had mentioned that there was a gentleman in North Carolina who was working with you who was assassinated.
Yes, Dr. T. Anthony Spearman. He
Oh
was
my
the
word.
former president of the NAACP. After Reverend William Barber left to start the Poor People's Campaign, Dr. T. Anthony Spearman was elected president of the North Carolina NAACP. And Dr. Spearman and I worked very, 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 very closely together in 2020. So yes. Mhm.
I'm sorry about that. That sounds horrific.
He was amazing. He got on the wrong side of legislators. He didn't care the Board of Elections. He didn't care. Dr. Spearman had marched with Dr. King. He was like 83 years old. And he said, something is right, it's right. And when it's wrong, it's wrong. It doesn't matter who is trying to do the wrong thing. I'm going to say this is wrong.
So we have our work cut out for us in the future
Yes,
in writing lots
yes.
of postcards.
yes.
How many people
yes.
total will we be will you be targeting?
With postcards, 12.5 million.
Oh my word. So we have
And for North Carolina, we are looking at a pledge to vote campaign for July or August, targeting all 1.4 million Black voters statewide. We're also looking at, do we do that in Texas? That was the difference of what bumped those numbers up so huge in 2020. There were two postcards. The first was a pledge to vote. All right, I'm going to vote. And then the second one was, all right, the election is here. Now, this is where you're going to vote. So again, remember, we never tell people who to vote for, but we make sure they know where, we make sure they know when. And if there is a free ride, we're going to be doing a lot more work around free rides to the polls because a number of our voters in 2020, the Georgia NAACP did a survey in 2020, and they surveyed 2,000 Black voters in Atlanta who did not vote in 2020 or the runoff. And they asked them, why didn't you vote? And they gave them 6 possible reasons. The top 3 reasons were, number 1, I didn't know where to vote. Number 2, I couldn't get there. And number 3, and it was a very distant third, I didn't like any of the candidates. So we are dealing with voters who are not getting the information they need. If they're even watching and getting information about the election on television, it just says vote on election day, and there is no more information. Where do I vote? When do I vote? How do I get there? Are there free rides? Doesn't answer any of that. We'd be partnering in Texas to reach Hispanic voters for the general election. Our other board member, Dr. Gabriela Limos, is president of Mi Familia Vota. So I will be talking with her, Coder, Latino, and there's 4 other very, very, very large groups that work with Hispanic voters and have a lot of people who are aware in this area. Yeah, they're all speaking English. We kind of have that information in PDI, but we've decided we're going to concentrate on Black voters because these are the voters that we do outreach to year round. And we're going to be encouraging our Hispanic partners to look at what we did modeling with democracy centers, and maybe they want to do the same in their communities because it's all local people and it's people that they trust and they're there year round. One of the things we know that communities of color really resent is this whole parachute in 2 months or 3 months before the election and disappear the day after the election, not to be seen again until 3 months before another election.
Kyoko commented, I would like you to work in Arizona for Hispanic voters. This is cool.
We have not decided, are we going to work in Arizona? We are thinking we will, but we need partners on the ground. Remember, we are not on the ground in Arizona. We're on the ground in Virginia, in Georgia, in Alabama, and South Carolina. And we now have partners on the ground in Texas, don't have partners on the ground in Arizona yet. And we've gotten a call from Louisiana. Would we be willing to come to Louisiana? So we're going to be looking at what do you have that is on the ground where you can be helping people. Hungry people don't vote. People don't have anywhere to live, don't vote. So what do you have in communities where these are real problems, where you are helping folks with these issues and giving them a reason to have hope? One of our democracy centers builds low income single family housing, and it's $160,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home. But in order to qualify, you must have been formerly homeless.
Who are your who would you say would be the Hispanic equivalent to Reclaim Our Vote? Or is there a Hispanic equivalent to Reclaim Our Vote?
Doing all the things that we do, I'm going to say maybe on a small scale. I've heard that Costa does a lot of what we do. And I don't know that much about Costa. I've never encountered them in Virginia. I know they're here. They're like the golden unicorn. Everybody's heard about it, but I've never seen it. And I've got to talk to Gabby and see what are her people doing on the ground. Where have they decided they're going to focus their attention last election cycle, they did Arizona. So they were on the ground in Arizona. So I wasn't really that worried about Arizona. We worked in Arizona in 2020. We did not work there in 2022. Since she knows Ruben Galejo, maybe that may be cause for her to say, I think we are really, really, really going to work in Arizona. So we will work there. Oh, I read that somebody donated to us. So thank you very, very much. Oh, yes, yes. Josh Stein is running for governor in North Carolina. Yes, his governor race is going to be a very, 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 very tight one. North Carolina had a court overturn their new board of elections. The new board of elections, this is the General Assembly being sneaky, said that each county was to have an equal number of Democrats and an equal number of Republicans on the board of elections. All right, that sounds fair. However, if they could not agree on the early voting locations, then the county would only have one. Right. So anyway, the lower court has overturned that. They're waiting to see if they can get the Supreme Court to take up the case. So North Carolina is now a voter ID state. And for voters who haven't voted since 2020, it wasn't a photo ID state there. So we have to tell voters it's a photo ID state. This is what you can use for photo ID. Everything that we do is about educating voters with the circumstances that they are going to have to deal with now trying to vote. Yes, and I agree. North Carolina is all hands on deck.
I don't see any other questions in here. Thank you
This has
so
been
much.
so much fun.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Take
You are
care, all of you. Hey, Helen. Hey, Kyoko. Hey, everybody. Yeah, yeah. Many, many folks that I know there. Yes.
so we have our work cut out for us to do lots of
Yes.
postcarding.
Yes, yes. Because as I said, every voter, we have an address.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for taking your time on this. At least in California, it's a sunny day. I have no idea whether in
It's lovely here. It is lovely here. It's 70 degrees in Virginia. Absolutely lovely.
well, thank you very much. And we appreciate all your work and we'll help you as much as we can.
And we at National so appreciate our volunteers all across the country, all the work you do, all those handwritten postcards and stamps and all the work that goes into postcarding, which is the most labor-intensive thing that we do.
But I think it looks like it's effective too. So
It
it's good.
works. It works. Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Oh, and hang on one second. I'm going to drop the link in the chat for anybody that wants the presentation that I used.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. Take care, everybody.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Well, after that great talk, then we have lots of postcard writing opportunities. We still have postcards for Georgia through Reclaim Our Vote, and contact Helen to get the addresses and postcards. And Helen, you had said that you would put your contact information in the chat so that anyone who doesn't have it already will be able to contact Helen to get postcards to write.
It's there. It's on.
It is there? Oh, wonderful. Okay. Our next meeting is going to be held a week from today, Sunday, March 24th at the Livermore Library. It's going to be in person only, and it's going to be from 12 o'clock to 1:30 p.m. And we, taking on the same theme, we will be writing postcards, and we'll also do a little bit of socializing. So from 12 to 1:30 p.m. next Sunday, March 24th, we hope to see you, and we can chat about what's going on in life and politics and write postcards. And if Andrea has inspired you, please come in next week. So have a lovely, lovely Sunday. And if that's it, I think that's the end of our meeting. Thank you very much.